بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. If everyone comes closer, inshallah, make a smaller circle and then it will be better, inshallah. So I mentioned in the topic message that I put out today on the group chat, on the masjid group chat, and everyone who's not on the group chat, if you join the masjid group chat, there's a QR code at the entrance to the masjid on the notice board. Then you'll get all the updates about the classes, and the videos will go on there as well, inshallah, so you'll get access to them. I mentioned that we'll talk about the congregational prayer, the jama'ah, the imam, the follower, and I mentioned we'll talk about sajdatul sahw as well. Before we make a start, I'll just clarify something from last week. I got asked a question about the issue of, if you remember when I said, if a person misses the sitting position after the second rak'ah, so he's praying 4 rak'ahs for example, and he misses the sitting position after the second rak'ah, that sitting position is wajib. If he stands up and he forgets, so he stands up for the third rak'ah and he didn't sit down, and then he goes back to the sitting position. Remember I mentioned that this would invalidate the salah because you're going from a standing back to a sitting. So you forgot to sit down after the second rak'ah, you stood up for the third rak'ah, and then you remembered, you're standing up now, but you remembered you missed the sitting. I go back to the sitting position. I said that will invalidate the salah. That's one position in the Hanafi school. So I need to clarify that. There's 2 positions in the Hanafi school. That's not the dominant position. The reason I said that last week was because people need to be aware of how severe that mistake could be. So some Hanafi scholars do say that invalidates the salah. However, other Hanafi scholars say no, the salah is valid, but it's a sinful thing to do. It's sinful to do, to start once you've stood up to go back to the sitting position for the first sitting in the salah. The second sitting in the salah, you have to go back to that sitting position. Because if you don't and you complete a 5th rak'ah for the final sitting, so if you're praying 2 rak'ahs, the final sitting will be after 2. If you're praying 3 rak'ahs, the final sitting will be after 3. If you're praying 4 rak'ahs, the final sitting will be after 4. That final sitting, you need to do after the exact number of rak'ahs. If you stood up to pray an extra one, and you completed an extra rak'ah, then your salah becomes invalid if you forgot to sit down. So, do we understand that, yeah? Inshallah. So, the sitting after the first sitting in the salah, if there's a salah which has 2 sittings, that's the best way to say it. If there is a salah which has 2 sittings, 2 tashahuds, the first one is wajib, the last one is fard. Fard. If you miss the first one and you stand fully up, you don't sit back down. If you sit back down, a lot of scholars say it will invalidate your salah, including other madhabs as well. And a lot of scholars also say no, you won't invalidate your salah, but it's not the right thing to do. So you don't sit back down. But if it's the fard sitting at the end of your prayer that you've missed, then as long as you haven't completed an extra rak'ah yet, then you sit back down. You haven't done the ruku yet, you sit back down, and you have to do that sitting before you do any extra rak'ah, because otherwise that will invalidate your salah. Okay. Yes, okay, let's continue with the reading, inshallah. After I've read a bit of this, then we'll talk about the congregational prayer, inshallah. Because last week we covered the entire description of the prayer in terms of the positions of the body, in terms of the things that you say at the different positions. So, inshallah, that's clarified. Today, inshallah, we'll talk about congregational prayer and about some other things as well. So, the first chapter that we're covering today, Babu Qada'il Fawaid, the chapter of making up missed prayers. So, you've missed the time for your prayer, now you have to make it up. So, we usually call them Qada Salah or Qada Namaz. وَمَنْ فَاتَتْهُ صَلَاةٌ قَضَاهَا إِذَا ذَكَرَهَا. Whoever misses a prayer, a salah passes him by, then he should make that prayer up as soon as he remembers it. So if you sleep through a prayer, then you will wake up, you will pray it straight away. If you forget about a prayer, you're too busy or something, you forget, and then you remember, you will pray it straight away. Because the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ mentions that إِذَا نَامَ أَحَدُكُمْ عَنِ الصَّلَاةِ إِذَا نَسْيَ أَحَدُكُمُ الصَّلَاةِ أَوْ نَامَ عَنْهَا فَلْيُصَلِّهَا إِذَا ذَكَرَهَا. If one of you sleeps through a prayer or he forgets about it, then he should pray it as soon as he remembers it. وَقَدَّمَهَا لُزُومًا عَلَى صَلَاةِ الْوَقْتِ. and he needs to pray the prayer that he's missed before he prays the current prayer. So say I've missed Maghrib and it's Isha time. Before I pray Isha, I have to pray my Maghrib beforehand. I can't pray Isha until I've prayed the Maghrib that I missed. That's if you've missed one prayer. إِلَّا أَن يَخَافَ فَوْتَ صَلَاةِ الْوَقْتِ, unless he thinks that he might miss the current prayer as well. Okay, so say I've missed Fajr and I've woke up at Dhuhr time, I should pray my Fajr before I pray my Dhuhr. The only time I can pray my Dhuhr first is if I think Asr time is getting close. If I pray my Fajr first, I'm going to miss Dhuhr as well. Then you pray Dhuhr first and then you pray Fajr. But say there's a Jama'ah going on and you're worried about missing the Jama'ah, you still need to pray your missed prayer first. The Jama'ah does not excuse the order, the missed prayer. What you could do is you could join the Jama'ah if you want to get the reward of the Jama'ah, but then you'll need to pray your missed prayer again, and you'll need to pray the current prayer again, even though you did the Jama'ah. Because in the Hanafi madhab, that order of the Salah is very, very important. Okay. Yeah, so if he's fearful that the current prayer is going to be missed, the timing is going to be missed, the time is approaching the end time, and he won't have time to pray both prayers, then he prays the current prayer first, and then the missed prayer. Otherwise, he always prays the missed prayer first. فإن فاتت صلوات رتبها في القضاء كما وجبت في الأصل إلا أن تزيد الفوائت على 6 صلوات فيسقط الترتيب فيها. So if a person has missed up to 5 prayers, then he must make up his prayers in order. So say I've missed a whole day of prayers. Somehow I've slept through Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, and it's Fajr time for the next day. I need to pray all those prayers before I pray my Fajr Salah, and I need to pray them in order. I can't mix up the order. However, if it gets to 6 or more prayers, you've missed 6 or more prayers, now the order is dropped. You don't need to make them up in order. Although it would be better to, if you can, but 6 or more, you don't need to make them up in order. You can pray the current prayer, for example, pray a few prayers, then pray the current prayer, then later on make up the prayers, etc. So the order is not necessary if you miss 6 or more salah. But if you've missed 5 or less salahs, you have to make them all up in order before the current prayer, unless the current prayer is about to exit its time. Inshallah, hope that makes sense. Okay. باب الأوقات التي تكره فيه الصلاة. The times in which it's makruh to pray. لا تجوز الصلاة عند طلوع الشمس. It's not allowed to pray at the sunrise. When the sun is rising, and that takes about 12, 15, 20 minutes. Once Fajr time finishes, basically sunrise starts, for about 15 to 20 minutes or so, when the sun is at that rising point, you can't pray at that time. ولا عند قيامها في الظهيرة, or at zawal time, when the sun is at the highest point. ولا عند غروبها, and at sunset you can't pray. So if you are looking at the horizon and the sun is actually setting now, you can still see part of the sun, but it started to touch the sea or whatever you're looking at, the landscape, the horizon, then you can't pray at that time. It would be not permissible to pray at that time. وَلَا يُصَلِّ عَلَى جَنَازَةٍ. At that time, those 3 times, you can't pray a funeral prayer. وَلَا يَسْجُدُ لِلتِّلَاوَةِ, and he can't do sajdatul tilawa either. The only thing he can do at those 3 times, إِلَّا عَصْرَ يَوْمِهِ عِنْدَ غُرُوبِ الشَّمْسِ. When the sun is setting and you haven't prayed Asr of that day, you can pray Asr at that time. So you'll be sinful for delaying it that long, but if the sun is setting and it's not fully set yet, technically you're still in Asr time, you can pray Asr of that day. You can't do a qada prayer, you can't do a missed prayer, but you can do Asr of that particular day. وَيُكْرَهُ أَن يَتَنَفَّلَ بَعْدَ صَلَاةِ الْفَجْرِ حَتَّى تَطْلُعَ الشَّمْسُ. And you cannot pray, or it's makruh to pray any nafil salah after Fajr time, after Fajr is prayed, after Fard of Fajr is prayed, until the sun has risen. Meaning after the sun has risen, you can pray Ishraq or Duha, but until the sun has risen, after you've prayed the Fard of Fajr, it's makruh to pray any prayer after that. وَبَعْدَ صَلَاةِ الْعَصْرِ حَتَّى تَغْرُبَ الشَّمْسُ. And similarly, after Asr prayer, you don't pray any optional prayers either, until the sun has set. So Maghrib time has entered. And so we said, if the sun is setting, in the Hanafi madhab, then you can still pray Asr of that day if you haven't prayed Asr of that day yet. But if the sun is rising, then the Fajr Salah is invalid in the Hanafi school. If the sun has started to rise, you can't pray Fajr. You have to wait till the sunrise is finished and then pray Fajr as a missed prayer. وَلَا بَأْسَ بِأَنْ يُصَلِّيَ فِي هَذَيْنِ الْوَقْتَيْنِ الْفَوَائِدِ. But the difference about, so remember the first three things I said was the actual sunrise, the actual sunset, and zawal time. You can't do janazah, you can't do sajdatul tilawa, you can't do qada prayer, anything. But after Fajr, so the sun has not started rising yet, but it's just you've prayed Fajr at the start time, and you have about an hour or so before sunrise, or after Asr, you prayed Asr at the start time, you have about an hour and a half before Maghrib. In that period of time, you can pray qada prayers. You can pray qada prayers. وَيَسْجُدَ لِلتِّلَاوَةِ, and you can do sajdatul tilawa. So it's a common question people ask me that, oh, Asr time has finished, I've prayed Asr, and there's an hour left before Maghrib, I'm reciting Quran, I've read sajdatul tilawa, ayatul tilawa, so there's certain ayahs you have to do sajda for. Ayatul sajda, sorry, not ayatul tilawa. Ayatul sajda. Certain sajdas you have to do certain ayahs you have to do a sajda for. Can you do it after you've prayed Asr? Yes, you can. But not at sunset. Not at sunset time. Not at sunrise time. Not at zawal time. But you can do it after Asr until Maghrib time, and you can do it after, or until sunset time rather, and you can do it after Fajr until sunrise time. You can do qada prayers, you can do janazah, you can do sajdatul tilawa. You can do these three. وَلَا يُصَلِّي رَكَعَتَيِ الطَّوَافِ. But you can't do the 2 rak'ahs of tawaf. You can't do the 2 rak'ahs of tawaf. Because after 7 tawaf, it's wajib in the Hanafi school to do 2 rak'ahs. If you're in this makruh time, you just wait till the time is finished, then pray it later on. ويكره أن يتنفل بعد طلوع الفجر بأكثر من ركعتي سنة الفجر. And once Fajr time has started and you've not prayed Fajr yet, you should not do, it's makruh to do any more nafil except the sunnah of Fajr, 2 sunnah. To do any more than that, say I want to pray istikhara, I want to pray something else, I want to just pray nafil or something, then that's makruh. You shouldn't do anything except the 2 sunnah of Fajr and then Salatul Fajr, in that Fajr time basically. Then the author says, وَلَا يَتَنَفَّلُ قَبْلَ الْمَغْرِبِ. And he should not do any nafil before Salatul Maghrib. Now if you go to the Haram, they do the adhan for Maghrib, and then there's a bit of a gap where people read their nafil and then they pray Salatul Maghrib. If you want to pray in that time, there's no problem. The reason for saying that you don't do any nafil before Maghrib is because we're supposed to pray Maghrib as quick as we can. So that's what he's trying to say here, that you pray Maghrib, you should focus on the fard, pray Maghrib as quick as you can, and not pray any nafil prayer beforehand. But if the masjid that you're in is delaying Maghrib anyway for 5 minutes so people can pray, then there's no harm in praying 2 nafil until Salatul Maghrib time starts. Or the prayer actually starts. Okay. Babun Nawafil, the chapter of the nafil prayer. And when he says nafil, he means anything that's not fard and wajib. Fard and wajib is not included here. Anything which is optional. So even sunnah would fall under nafil. السنة في الصلاة أن يصلي ركعتين بعد طلوع الفجر. The sunnah for the salah is that you pray 2 rak'ahs before the Fajr prayer, after sunrise, after the Fajr time has started. So 2 sunnah of Fajr basically he's trying to say. وأربعا قبل الظهر, 4 before Dhuhr, وركعتين بعدها, and 2 after Dhuhr, وأربعا قبل العصر, and the 4 sunnah before Asr. That's not an emphasized sunnah. So it's a 4 optional sunnah before Asr. It's not emphasized the same way as the Fajr sunnah is or the Dhuhr sunnahs are. وَإِنْ شَاءَ رَكَعَتَيْنِ, and if he wants to, he prays 2 before Asr. So 4 or 2. وَرَكَعَتَيْنِ بَعْدَ الْمَغْرِبِ, and 2 rak'ahs after Maghrib. That is emphasized. وَأَرْبَعًا قَبْلَ الْعِشَاءِ, 4 before Isha. That's not emphasized. So that's not an emphasized one. You don't have to do that one. But it's better if you do, but you don't have to. وَأَرْبَعًا بَعْدَهَا, and he says 4 rak'ahs after Isha. وَإِنْ شَاءَ رَكَعَتَيْنِ, and if he wants to pray, he prays 2 instead. Meaning, you can either pray the 2 sunnah which is emphasized after Isha and another 2 if a person wants, or he just prays the 2. So we usually say 4 sunnah before Isha, 2 sunnah after Isha, and then you can do an extra 2 nafil basically if you want to. But the emphasized sunnahs are 2 before Fajr, 4 before Dhuhr, 2 after Dhuhr, 2 after Maghrib, 2 after Isha. Those are the 12 rak'ahs that the Hanafi school mentions, because there's a bit of a difference with the other madhabs. But the Hanafi school mentions about the person who prays these 12 extra rak'ahs in the day, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will build for them a palace in Jannah. So we should try and pray those 12 if we can. Okay. وَنَوَافِلُ النَّهَارِ إِنْ شَاءَ صَلَى رَكْعَتَيْنِ بِتَسْلِيمَةٍ وَاحِدَةٍ وَإِنْ شَاءَ أَرْبَعًا وَتُكْرَهُ الزِّيَادَةُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. In terms of praying salah in the day, nafil salah, optional prayers, then a person prays 2 and then does salam. So nafil salah now. Not the sunnahs, but the nafil salah. You pray 2 and then you do salam. You want to pray another 2, again salam. Every 2 rak'ahs you do salam basically. If you want, you can pray 4 together. So you can pray 4 nafil technically and then do salam. But anything more than 4 is not recommended. So to do 6 rak'ahs, to do 8 rak'ahs is makruh in the daytime. فَأَمَّا نَافِلَةُ اللَّيْلِ. But as for the nafil of the night time, what's the nafil of the night time? قِيَامُ اللَّيْلِ. Tahajjud salah or قِيَامُ اللَّيْل or whatever name you want to call it, the optional prayer of the night. فَقَالَ أَبُو حَنِيفَةَ إِن صَلَّى 8 رَكْعَاتٍ بِتَسْلِيمَةٍ وَاحِدَةٍ جَازَ وَتُكْرَهُ الزِّيَادَةُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said that if a person wants to pray 8 rak'ahs in one go and does the salam once at the end, doesn't do salam between all these 2, but he prays 8 rak'ahs, meaning he sits obviously after every 2, but then stands up for the next one. He prays them all together in one prayer and then does salam at the end of 8, then that's permissible. So Abu Hanifa's position is that is permissible, but anything more than 8 is makruh. وقال لا يزيد بالليل على ركعتين بتسليمة واحدة. يزيد بالليل على ركعتين بتسليمة واحدة. But some others, the other scholars said, the other position in the Hanafi school is that you don't do more than 2 without a salam. So like we usually do. So we do 2 rak'ahs of nafil or qiyamul layl or whatever, and then we say assalamu alaikum, and then we do 2 more. So we separate them all with salam. That's the other position, that should be done. But the Abu Hanifa's position that was mentioned earlier is that if you were to do 8 in a row with one salam, one salam at the end, both ways, then that would be permissible. But obviously, the best thing to do is just do the 2. That will be agreed upon by everyone. وَالْقِرَاءَةُ فِي الْفَرْضِ وَاجِبَةٌ فِي الرَّكَعَتَيْنِ الْأُولَيَيْنِ. Reciting Quran is obligatory or is wajib reciting Quran is obligatory in the first 2 rak'ahs of any fard prayer. So we know this, that you recite Fatiha and then you recite some Quran in the first 2 rak'ahs, but in the second 2 rak'ahs you don't recite in the same way, isn't it? You recite Fatiha by itself. So in the first 2 it's compulsory to recite Fatiha and some Quran. وَهُوَ مُخَيَّرٌ فِي الْأُخْرَيَيْنِ. But he has the choice in the second 2 rak'ahs. Wa alaikum salam. إِن شَاءَ قَرَأَ الْفَاتِحَةِ. If he wants to, he recites Fatiha. وَإِن شَاءَ سَبَّحَ. And if he wants to, he does tasbih, subhanallah. وَإِن شَاءَ سَكَتَ. And if he wants to, he stays silent. So the Hanafi school says, in the 3rd rak'ah and 4th rak'ah of a fard prayer, you don't have to recite Quran. You don't have to recite Fatiha. Even though that's the sunnah, so we should do it. We should recite Fatiha. I'm not saying anyone should not recite Fatiha, because the other madhabs will say you need to. But this particular madhab says that the Fatiha is what's mentioned, but if a person was to say subhanallah, if a person just stayed silent but stood up, technically his salah will be fulfilled and will be correct still. But you should recite Fatiha in the 3rd and 4th rak'ah of any fard salah, by itself, Fatiha. Okay. وَالْقِرَاءَةُ وَاجِبَةٌ فِي جَمِيعِ رَكَعَاتِ النَّافِلِ رَكَعَاتِ النَّفْلِ وَفِي جَمِيعِ الْوِتْرِ. And reciting, and we've covered this last week, reciting in every single rak'ah which is not fard salah, any nafil, sunnah, witr, anything, you have to recite Fatiha and a surah. Fatiha and a surah. People make the mistake because they pray 4 rak'ahs of fard and they recite a surah in the first 2, but then they just recite Fatiha in the 3rd and 4th. They think they do the same with the sunnah prayers or with nafil prayers or with witr. That's not the case. You have to recite a surah after Fatiha in every single rak'ah of a non-fard prayer, every other prayer.
Is this really for all schools?
Yes. Oh no, sorry. In the other schools, Fatiha is compulsory, and the other surah, some have said.
We learned that way that the Zuhur prayer for Sunnah
Yeah.
for the Prophet.
Yeah.
So we pray 2 rakah, Surah Fatiha plus something, and then next, third and fourth rakah, we recite only Surah Fatiha.
No, every madhab says that you should recite a surah as well, but they differ. Is it obligatory or not? So will it make your salah? Will you be sinful if you don't do it? That's why they differ. So some madhab say, Fatiha is the compulsory part in every rak'ah though. Every rak'ah. Fatiha is compulsory and the surah is optional, it's sunnah. But everyone agrees that in a nafil prayer, as far as I'm aware, in a nafil prayer you're supposed to pray a Fatiha and a surah in every rak'ah, yeah.
In all four?
Madhabs?
No,
Or in four, yeah, in all 4 rak'ahs, yeah. Of sunnah, any sunnah, nafil, wajib, any other prayer, yeah. Only the fard you can pray Fatiha by itself in the 3rd and 4th rak'ah. Yeah. Okay. Right, let's finish this bit and then we'll talk briefly about the jama'ah and the sajdatul sahw inshallah. Okay. Okay, and he says here that if you enter a nafil salah, you start the nafil salah but you break your wudu, in the Hanafi madhab, it's wajib to return and do wudu again and repeat the salah, even a nafil salah. Because in the Hanafi madhab, once you've started an optional act of worship, you've made it wajib on yourself to finish it. So if you're doing nafil and you break your wudu, you need to go do wudu and repeat the salah at some point. And you're allowed to pray nafil sitting down even if you're able to stand up. We know this, yeah? You can sit down to pray your optional prayers, not fard or wajib, not fard or witr prayer or anything which is wajib, but the nafil prayers, you can sit down, pray them sitting down, you'll get less reward, but you can pray them sitting down, it will be valid. And if you start the prayer standing up, then you sit down without a reason, Abu Hanifa says it's permissible, but the other 2 imams said it's not allowed. What if you start the prayer standing up, to sit down without a reason why, without an excuse. If you get an excuse, you get leg pain or whatever, fine. But if you've got no excuse, you can't stand it sitting up, start it standing up, and then choose to sit down. But everyone agrees in the madhab, you can start it sitting down if you want to, even without an excuse. You'll just get less reward in that case. And this is important for people. وَمَنْ كَانَ خَارِجَ الْمِصْرِ Anyone who is outside of the city, meaning you're on the motorway, you're traveling somewhere, you're outside of the city borders. يتنفل على دابته إلى أي جهة توجهت. He can do nafil sitting down on his ride. So if you're riding a horse, for example, obviously in those days. Today, if you're riding a car or a plane or whatever, you can do nafil sitting down in your seat any direction. You don't have to face the qibla. That's nafil salah. That's not fard salah. So if you need to pray your sunnah prayers, you can do that also. You need to pray nafil prayer, you can do that also sitting down in your car. Provided you don't do too much excessive movement, you need to stay still as possible, obviously. And then you just, make a gesture with your head. So ruku, you'll do this. And then sujood, you'll do this a little bit lower. Just with the neck movement, that's all. So you can do that. Any direction that you want to, but you will do the ruku and the sujood with gesturing. Okay. Now, the Imam will now talk about sajdatul sahu. But I'll talk from memory rather than from the text now, just for the sake of time. Sajdatul sahu is the 2 sajdas that a person makes if he makes a mistake in a salah at the end of the salah. How does the Hanafi school do the sajda first? How do they do these 2 sajdas? At the end of the prayer, you've finished everything in the prayer, you're sitting down, you're doing your tashahhud. Once you've got to ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. At that point, a person will say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to the right only, and then he will do 2 sajdas. Allahu Akbar, Subhana Rabbi al-Ala, Subhana Rabbi al-Ala, Subhana Rabbi al-Ala. Allahu Akbar, he can say Rabbi Aghfirli if he wants. Allahu Akbar, Subhana Rabbi al-Ala, Subhana Rabbi al-Ala, Subhana Rabbi al-Ala. Allahu Akbar. He's done the 2 sajdas just like I did 2 normal sajdas. But these are additional because he's made a mistake. Then he starts again, At-tahiyyatu lillahi was-salawatu wat-tayyibat, all the way to the end of the prayer and does salam like normal. Okay? So that's the procedure. That's the procedure for the sajda to sahwi in the Hanafi school, whatever mistake it is. Because in the other schools, it will depend what type of mistake you do. If you add something or you take it away from the salah, etc. The type of mistake will change the method of your sajda to sahwi. But the Hanafi school is very easy. They have one method which covers both hadith. They do it before a salam and after a salam. They do it before a salam and after the salam. What sort of things will necessitate doing sajda to sahwi? Missing any wajib component, or adding something to the salah from the things of the salah which was not supposed to be in that place. So for example, what's wajib? You miss sitting after the two rak'ahs. That first sitting in a prayer with two sittings, the first sitting is wajib. A person forgets to do that. He does sajda to tilawa, sajda to sahwi, at the end of the prayer. A person forgets to recite a surah after Fatiha. He does two sajdas at the end of the prayer. A person forgets to recite, Surah Al-Fatiha, for example. In the Hanafi school, he will, as long as he's recited some Quran, he will do the two sajdas at the end of the prayer. You have to learn what all the wajib things are of the salah, and then you'll know basically if you miss it, what is requiring sajda to sahwi or not. So if you miss something which is sunnah, then you don't have to recite the two sajdas at the end. So for example, a person recites Subhana Rabbiyal Azim twice instead of 3 times. The 3 times is a sunnah, it's not obligatory. So if you miss that, if you recite it twice instead of 3 times, you don't need to do sajda to sahwi at the end. You recite the Quran without being in order. So you recite Qul A'udhu Birabbil Falaq in the first rak'ah and Qul Huwallahu Ahad in the second rak'ah. It's something which is against what you should do. It's against the best way of doing it, but it's not wajib, so you don't need to do sajda to sahwi at the end. So anything which is sunnah, you don't need to do sajda to sahwi at the end. Anything which is wajib, and maybe inshallah next week we might go through the list of those things which are wajib, because I realize we haven't done that now. Anything which is wajib, you must do the sajda to sahwi at the end of the salah, as long as you remember to do it. Okay. Also adding something in which is from the types of things of the salah without it being from the correct position. So for example, a person stands up. Yeah, we're still recording. A person stands up after sitting for the first sitting, and then he goes to sit back down. Remember, we said that this might invalidate the salah. According to some scholars, it will invalidate the salah. According to other scholars, it won't invalidate the salah. What have you done really? You've added a standing position into the salah. You've done an extra standing position. Okay, forget that. Make it easier. I do 3 sajdas instead of 2. That's an easier example. I've done 3 sajdas instead of 2. So the sajda is from the type of things of the salah, but I've done an extra one. I've put it in the wrong place. I shouldn't be putting a 3rd sajda where I put it. In that case, I need to do sajda to sahwi at the end. So missing a wajib, or adding something to the salah from the types of things of the salah which is not supposed to be there. Okay. So those are the things which require sajda to sahwi. If you're praying behind an imam and the mistake happens, you've done the mistake yourself, but you're praying behind the imam at that point, then you don't need to do sajda to sahwi at the end, because the imam's prayer has rectified your prayer. If however you're late to the prayer, and you're doing the salah by yourself now, you're doing an extra rak'ah because you were late, and you make a mistake then you need to do sajda to sahwi at the end. But anything you do behind the imam is corrected for by the imam. If the imam makes a mistake, he needs to do his own sajda to sahwi with the congregation. Okay. I'll try to leave a bit of time for questions after that, inshallah. The congregational prayer is a prayer which a person prays behind an imam. First of all, rulings for the imam. The imam is praying his own prayer just like he would when he is by himself, except that if he is praying a loud prayer, he has to do it loud. If he is praying a silent prayer, he has to do it silent. In the Hanafi school, it's wajib. So that's something. So that's another example of a wajib thing. If the imam forgot to recite out loud in Fajr or Isha or Maghrib, or he recited out loud in Asr and Dhuhr, he would have to do sajda to sahwi at the end, because that's a wajib that he's made a mistake on. So the imam is praying his own prayer. If he's leading the prayer for women in the Hanafi school, he has to make the intention that he's leading women in the salah. Otherwise, the salah of the women is invalid. So in the Hanafi school, it's very important that women know that the imam needs to be aware that women are praying behind him. The other madhabs don't have this particular ruling, some of the other madhabs, but the Hanafi school says no, because women generally don't pray in the jama'ah, generally. Therefore, if the imam is leading women, he needs to make an additional intention for that he's specifically leading women as well. So as long as he knows that women are praying behind him, and he's conscious of the fact that women are praying behind him, there's no problem, he's made that intention. That's important to know. What else is important to know for the imam? The imam prays his prayer like he normally does. He gets corrected by someone behind him. So if he's made a mistake in his positions, people can say Subhanallah to correct the imam, Allahu Akbar to correct the imam, or they can correct his recitation, but they shouldn't correct the recitation except for, they shouldn't correct the recitation if the imam has recited what is wajib to recite. So he's recited Fatiha correctly, and he's recited an extra 3 verses of the Quran correctly. If he's got more than that, and he's making a mistake, then there's no need to correct, unless the meaning has become a batil meaning. The meaning has become corrupted because of the mistake of the imam. So for example, instead of saying Allah knows the unseen, he recites Allah does not know the unseen by accident. In that case, then they have to correct the imam's recitation. If they don't correct the imam's recitation in that instance where the meaning has become batil, then in the Hanafi school, the whole salah has become batil. They need to repeat the salah. And that's happened several times when I've been praying behind an imam. Once we've had to repeat the salah because the other time was a nafil prayer. But we should have repeated that salah, to be honest. But if we weren't able to get that message to the imam. But once the imam did make a mistake which corrupted the meaning of the prayer, but he went into ruku before anyone could correct. So I said to the imam afterwards that we need to repeat the prayer in the Hanafi school because the meaning has become corrupted. So we had to repeat that prayer. Okay, so that's the imam's prayer. The follower, so the imam basically prays the way he would normally, except he has to pray out loud when it's a loud prayer. The follower, he recites everything same as a normal prayer, except what? Except he doesn't recite Quran behind the imam. He doesn't recite Fatiha, and he doesn't recite a surah in the Hanafi school. He doesn't recite Sami Allahu liman hamida. But pretty much everything else he will recite. So everything else pretty much in the salah he will recite. If he joins the salah and the imam is reciting Quran loud or quietly, then he does not say Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika wa tabarak asmuka. But any other position he can say that. He can say that. So if he joins the prayer, the imam's in ruku', he can say Subhanaka Allahumma if he wants to, but otherwise he can join the ruku' very quickly so that he makes the rak'ah. He doesn't need to say it. If the imam's in sajda, he can say Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika wa tabarak asmuka if he wants to for the opening invocation of the prayer. When a person comes, he changes position either with the imam or after the imam. Either with the imam according to Abu Hanifa or after the imam according to the 2 students. Either way, he doesn't go ahead of the imam. If he goes ahead of the imam, this would be sinful for him. This would be something that's not good. It goes against the hadith. But in the Hanafi school, it doesn't invalidate your salah. It doesn't invalidate your salah to go ahead of the imam. But if a person does so, he's sinful because he's going against the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What else about the follower's prayer? When a follower joins the prayer, this is the other thing I was going to mention. Last thing I was going to mention. Okay, we'll have the adhan now, inshallah. Okay, so the last thing to mention today, inshallah, is what happens if a latecomer reaches the imam. The imam is praying and the latecomer comes. He joins the prayer wherever the imam is. If he makes it to ruku', then obviously we said he joins the imam in ruku'. As long as the latecomer and the imam both have a straight back in ruku' at the same time for a millisecond, then the latecomer has made that rak'ah. He doesn't need to make that rak'ah up. But if the imam has started to come up and the latecomer is still going down, he's not in position yet, and he doesn't reach position until the imam has started to come up, meaning the imam and the latecomer are not in the same position at the same time, then he has not made the rak'ah. He needs to make it up. And if you're in doubt, you're not sure, because the imam, ideally the imam should start saying Sami Allahu liman hamida as soon as he starts coming up, so that the muqtadi knows. But many imams, as we said, they'll come all the way up and then they'll say Sami Allahu liman hamida. Doesn't help anyone. So if they do that, then if a person is doubting whether they've made the rak'ah or not, they should assume that they haven't made the rak'ah. Because in Islam we go with what we're certain about, not what we are doubtful about. So if the Imam and the latecomer are in the same position of ruku', exactly the same, straight back, the final position of ruku', then he's made the rak'ah even for a millisecond. But if the Imam has started to come up and the latecomer has not quite reached his full ruku' yet, and the back is not straight, then he has missed the rak'ah and he needs to make it up at the end. A person who needs to make up one rak'ah will make it up like normal. You pray an extra rak'ah, Fatiha and a surah, and you finish your prayer. A person who needs to make up 2 rak'ahs, if he is praying a 3 rak'ah prayer like Maghrib or Witr, then he needs to sit down after the first rak'ah. Does that make sense? So he's prayed 1 with the Imam, and now he's prayed 1 by himself. Yes? So that's now 2 that he's prayed. So he has to sit down, even though he's only done 1 by himself now. Does that make sense? He sits down for tashahhud, and then he will stand and he will recite Fatiha and a surah. He will recite Fatiha and a surah. Why is this? Because with the Imam, he's prayed the 3rd rak'ah of the salah, which is Fatiha by itself. In Maghrib, this is Maghrib example. Fatiha by itself. He needs to pray 2 rak'ahs, he needs to pray his first rak'ah and he needs to pray his second rak'ah. So both of those will have a surah in it. So both of them he needs to pray Fatiha and a surah, Fatiha and a surah. But after a total of 2, 1 with the Imam, 1 by himself, he needs to sit down. Because after every 2 rak'ahs we need to sit down for tashahhud and then stand up. Okay, so people get confused about that because it's weird to sit for tashahhud and then stand up and do Fatiha and a surah. But that's what needs to be done when you're the latecomer. If you've missed 3 rak'ahs in a 4 rak'ah, in 3 rak'ahs in a 3 rak'ah prayer, you pray it just like you normally would by yourself. Salatul Maghrib, you pray it, you get up, Fatiha and a surah, Fatiha and a surah, then you sit down, then you pray Fatiha by itself in the 3rd rak'ah, just like a normal salah. Or witr will be the same, you'll pray it exactly as you would pray it by yourself. If you're praying 3 rak'ahs, you're making up 3 rak'ahs of a 4 rak'ah prayer, then it's the same thing as Maghrib if you've missed 2 rak'ahs. You've prayed 1 with the Imam, now you need to pray 1 by yourself with a surah and sit down for tashahhud. Then you will stand up for the 3rd rak'ah and pray it with a surah. Does that make sense? Your 3rd total rak'ah, but that's really your 2nd rak'ah because you've missed the first 2 with the Imam. So you'll do tashahhud, you'll stand up, pray Fatiha with a surah, and then you'll go for the 4th rak'ah and pray Fatiha by itself. Because you need to calculate in your head that with the Imam and without the Imam, I have prayed the right number of rak'ahs with a surah and with Fatiha, and the right number of rak'ahs with just Fatiha. So with the Imam, if you're late, then you'll be praying the last rak'ah with the Imam, he'll just be praying Fatiha. So you need to pray an extra rak'ah with Fatiha and an extra 2 rak'ahs with Fatiha and the surah. So total, you need to make sure the number of rak'ahs, the number of surahs, the number of Fatihas add up to the correct number. And the tashahhud will always take place after a total of 2 rak'ahs. A total of 2 rak'ahs, you will sit for tashahhud, and then to finish the salah, you'll finish it like normal. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept. Any questions very quickly before the salah? And if not, you can ask the questions after the salah, inshallah. Yeah.
Can you do qada salah in the jama'ah?
You can do qada salah in the jama'ah, yes. You can do the adhan and you do the iqamah for qada salah, you do it in jama'ah, yes, you can do, yeah. As long as you're praying the same prayer, you can't pray. So if you're praying, one's praying asr, one's praying asr now, and you're praying your dhuhr that you've missed, you can't pray that behind him. You have to be praying the same prayer. Yeah. Any other question? Yeah.
Is the sahu required when one has doubts
If you often make the mistake of forgetting how many rak'ahs that you pray, if this happens several times to you, then you go with what you think is the case. If you go with what you think is the case, that you're 80% sure, 70% sure that's the case, then you don't do sajdatul sahw. You just assume that's the correct, and that shaitan's playing tricks with your mind. If you're really not sure, it's 50-50, then you go with what you're sure about, meaning I'm not sure if I prayed 3 or 4. I know I've definitely prayed 3 minimum. I'll go with that. I will sit down after the 3rd rak'ah, because I need to make sure I've sat after 4 rak'ahs total. So if it could be my 4th one, I need to sit down for tashahhud. Then I will pray an extra rak'ah, just in case it was the 3rd, pray the 4th. So I sit down both after the 3rd and the 4th, if that makes sense, just because that fard needs to be fulfilled of the last sitting. And then I will do sajdatul sahw, yes, at the end. Does that make sense? I hope that was a bit complicated rush answer. Any other questions quickly before we finish? Yeah, go on.
What's the ruling on verbally stating your intention before Salah?
So you don't need to do so as long as it's in your heart or in your mind. But if you want to verbally do it, there's no problem in that. But it won't affect the validity of the prayer. It's more what's in your heart and what's in your mind. That's important.
I've heard that it's actually bid'ah to verbally state your.
Okay, well, some people hold that opinion, but we would say that if a person wants to do it just to be safe, then there's no problem doing it. But you don't have to do it, so there's no problem. Inshallah. Alhamdulillah. If anyone wants to ask questions after the salah, I'll wait at the back, inshallah.